Play Sports Radio Network.
That's what I'm talking about.
You ain't never heard nothing like this. Let me work, show me where the mic is. I'm on stage, black shirt and my Timbs. You know how I do it, I ain't playing with you, I've been grinding. Anybody trying to sleep on me, better do something with your eyelids. I hear a lot of whining, but I don't hear a lot of rhyming. Whoa. Everybody got opinions, let it go into my ear, then I block that. Put me on stage, I'ma rock that. Saying you the best, stop that, phony, I am not that. Yeah. What are y'all doing now?
Welcome into the afternoon sports drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler with you, Jason Elmquist joining as well. Tom Dorado will be here in the 4 o'clock hour. A ton of stuff to get to. Dan Buffa is going to join us at 3:25. He is St. Louis through and through. I thought, you know what, we're going to talk to him about baseball, which we still will. I was hoping by this time we'd actually have some sort of a more set-in-stone resolution, but I should know better by now. I really should.
I saw the best tweet in response to this going back and forth.
Yeah.
Is this current agreement between the MLB and MLBPA is like driving around town wasting gas just to find just to find the cheapest gas station and save 1 cent per gallon. That's what it feels like.
That's brilliant. It's so true, though. It's awful. I mean, it has been back and forth. Just over and over, and again to these last few days, so much so that we got a new proposal today. I got to give you credit. You hit it on the head yesterday. You asked Tom and I what would be the one thing that would hold players back, and you said to you it would be the amount of games.
Yep.
Yeah, that was it. And I thought
10 more.
Yeah, 10 more. I thought that
seriously. Come on, guys.
I thought 65 would be a nice medium landing.
But I thought the thing was 60.
It was originally, and then
but what I'm thinking is they're doing the whole. Well, we went 65, so we'll say 70, and since you said 60, we'll meet in the middle.
Yeah, it's like, why in the world could you not have settled just on the to me? That's when they said they originally announced the 60 games, and it said. Yeah. I think I even told you, okay, if they bump it up to 65. Maybe, and I thought just maybe here, since the framework was there, and they were going to get full prorated salaries, the players might be actually okay with that and jump on it. It's like, no, we need 5 more games. I mean, it's getting so tedious.
The number I saw from the owner side was 60.
Yeah, well,
that was the definitive answer.
The last one I read, it was 60, and they had said when we finish talks here, we're probably going to have around 65 games. So I don't know. It may have finally actually just been 60.
Yeah, the tweet that I had seen from one of the MLB beat writers said 60 over a 70-day period.
Okay, yeah. So bump it up 10 games.
Like, how much money do you need? Like, let's be honest. That's all it's about. It's about let's bleed as much money into this as we can as players.
I saw the numbers on it. 10 extra games equals 250 million more in
player salary.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at it from that numbers, you're like, okay, but seriously?
Yeah, but also when you think about most of that money is going towards your Mike Trouts and your guys who are making $45 million a year.
Yeah, we're not talking all these players that are going to be making little, for baseball terms, little money.
Yeah, for the veterans minimum, they're probably going to get maybe less than $1 million extra for it or something like that.
So they're fighting for that. I think there's a ton of greed going around. I can't wait. So Dan Buffa will join us at 3:25. He does a lot of work with KMOX over there, the historic radio station that's done Cardinals games forever. He's also with 590 The Fan in St. Louis. He actually had an article that he wrote today that he gave 10 different jobs that he thinks Rob Manfred could do other than be commissioner of baseball. It's fantastic.
Flip burgers.
Yeah.
Number one.
I'm not kidding you.
You want fries with that?
Yeah, I'll have to read you off some of them because they're so good. I can't wait to talk to him about that. So he'll be on shortly. Hey, Chuba Hubbard is making his rounds. He found his way onto ESPN. I was already privy, I think you were too, of they were doing that OSU football series that they're going to do.
No, I did not know about it until the ESPN Plus thing last night.
I'd heard about it previously to this airing, and so now you get a little bit of addition here to it with the clips that they pulled of Chuba and Mike Gundy, both kind of talking about everything that went down there. It's about 2 minutes long. We're going to play it, and I also am going to play a little bit of his time on First Take, and we're gonna kind of break it down as we go, because there were a few things that in there that stood out to me, and I'm sure you as well. It's like I said, he's kind of making his rounds now. But I mean, ESPN, Stephen A. Smith comes knocking on the door. You go and you answer. So we'll get this up here in just a second on the Gundy. When you saw the, for instance, for me, the update I got yesterday, all it said was, Mike Gundy says wearing that shirt made me look like a dumbass. That was the update I got. And I went, got to go view this video. And it was, exactly that. So I'm getting it over here, and we will listen to it right now.
I didn't know that some of the stances they had taken. I didn't know that. But then you look at it and say, okay, I was a dumbass. I put the shirt on not knowing enough about the shirt. I understood exactly why the players got frustrated when they found that out, or whatever, however they found out what it was. I didn't know. I didn't know till the next day. Well, I knew that night, but I didn't confirm it until I did a little research, and I was like, what a dumbass. So that was my fault. The way the players feel about me, and I upset them and broke their heart, that bothered me more than losing games. And that's the truth. But that's why now that as humans, when we make mistakes, the only thing we can do is admit we're wrong, own up to it, be humble, accept criticism, make it better, and move forward.
I'm just someone that always wants to, pride myself on doing the right thing and stand for the right reasons. And, I'm not a politician. I'm not anything like that. I'm just someone that stands up for what's right, and that's all I was trying to do. I mean, I heard from Coach Gundy later that day. We talked. We talked for about 2 hours, and he said some stuff, and, I realized, some people may be ignorant in the fact, and some people may just not understand, what's going on, or the seriousness of what's going on. And some people need to be educated. And whether I can't depict exactly what's going on with him or whatever, I'm going to do my best to educate him. I'm in a position right now where I have to act fast. Right now, it's really up to him if he wants to make things right or not.
So he kind of left it there at the end of the ball's in Mike Gundy's court. And that was the one that kind of struck me. It's like, okay, they still have some work to do, it seems. I mean, this isn't completely just finished, but I don't know. When I heard that, I think that I hear some more of Gundy maybe realizing even more about really what it meant, what all this means. And then you hear Chuba kind of say, well, if I can educate him, then that would be great. If I was able to be the guy that could tell him more about what exactly that meant and why the reaction was the way it was, well, then who better than myself, So you kind of appreciate that too from Chuba being able to open up a little bit and talk about, and he's got work to do as well, and is not finished with it. Yeah,
and what I take from Chuba's conversation in that clip is it felt like maybe they kind of were viewing Gundy as a guy who again, kind of use his word, was kind of ignorant to the situation, and I think that's a fair assessment from my point of view, because you go back to the end of May when you had coaches all over the country, coming out and when the riots were, or the protests were really picking up, you saw Lincoln Riley up at OSU, you saw Mike Boynton, Littell, all these coaches. And Mike Gundy's comments were more about the program, and I just pulled it back up, and here's the big thing, and especially right now, he didn't even in that tweet that he sent out, with his message at the end of May, did not use the most impactful phrase that could be used right now in society when you are the leader of black men. Black Lives Matter. He did not use that in his message, and I think maybe that's something that they caught on to as well. Is he's again, I don't want to say come up with an opinion for them, but I can see where things that he's said and done over the past 2 to 3 months that can lean towards, hey, this was the last straw. You've been doing. You said those comments back in April about how basically the players need to get on the field to get money into the state. Kind of, not necessarily brushing off the risk of them coming down with the virus, but basically saying that, hey, we need these players because we need money. And then you have kind of a lackluster response to the protests, and then I can see where he's coming from with saying that maybe Gundy was coming off a little ignorant to what's going on around him when he is the head coach of a Power 5 football program.
Yeah, and in that position, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that he has to come out and then never say anything really if he doesn't want to, but in that position you would understand why players, when a lot of predominantly African American, are going to say, well, we do want to hear something. So I get that part. Play a little bit here of his time on First Take, and you and I will butt in here and kind of just break this down. This was the first question from Molly Querum. I think that's how you say her last name. She brought up the allegations made from Alfred Williams, which we all know already, read about that. Jacob Unruh talked about it in the Oklahoma, and he got that interview. And back at a game with Colorado when Gundy was playing in '89, Alfred Williams said he called him the N-word. He said also he didn't want him to get fired. He just wants to see growth, I think is what he called it. Let's hear what Chuba had to say about that.
I'm going to read it to you because I don't want to get any of the words wrong in such a sensitive subject. An old allegation against Mike Gundy surfaced Wednesday when in a radio interview, Alfred Williams, a former star linebacker at Colorado, said when Gundy was the Oklahoma State quarterback in 1989, he called Williams the N-word. At the time, Gundy denied the allegation. What do you make of those type of situations?
Situations like those are tough. And, I'm born 1999. So I personally can't comment on something that, I don't have any information on. I believe, the people that were there know the truth, and that's the most important.
I respect that right there, because that was easily a question that could have, and anybody else could have done the same thing, but Chuba could have been like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. We got to do an investigation. We got to look into all this. I appreciate him saying, look, I wasn't even around at that time. I need to understand more before I'm able to comment on that.
Well, and that's the thing is, because, there's another clip that I saw where they, they're asking him the tough questions. In my mind, they're almost baiting. But
I'd say so.
when they asked later on, Max Kellerman asked about what changes are you guys demanding within the program, and then also asked about what your relationship with Gundy was like before the OAN T-shirt, and he didn't bite on those. When it came to what changes, he's like, I'm not going to speak on that. That's something that our team is addressing. And then as far as and I assume it's something that we'll be listening to, but it's a case where when I listen now, especially because I hadn't heard that one yet, but some of the other stuff that I've listened to, I've seen responses on Twitter. A lot of people from the black community, a lot of them kind of attacking Chuba of, well, this was a lackluster, there was no substance, blah blah blah. But I think the most fascinating responses I've seen are actually from current black college athletes, people who understand kind of how the media works, what they're going for. Because here's the thing we need to keep in mind when we're listening to this, and if you're saying, well, he didn't have a good response to this, in my mind, as a member of the media, I can say this, especially since I see a lot of people with cameras, whether it's print people doing video for your website or for TV in general, they're looking for the gotcha moment.
Absolutely.
100%. I'm as a print writer, I'm looking for a good quote to lead off my, a hard-hitting quote, but not necessarily the aha, I got you moment. And ESPN, there's a reason that ESPN had him on First Take, the first show of the day, is because if you get that aha moment, that gotcha moment, then you have an entire day's worth of every single TV and radio show that ESPN or Fox is connected to will run that clip and talk about just that.
Yeah.
And that's why I have a load of respect for Hubbard, because again, some of the parts that I saw, he was very vocal about him when the questions were about himself, he opened up.
Yeah.
But when it was about the program or about Mike Gundy, he's shielded away from it, and I think that's smart because the ESPN is looking for the gotcha moment, and he could have, and they, again, that question's set up for getting an aha response or Kellerman's one later on. And that's what I think a lot of the play, and because some of the responses I saw were from college players across the country, not just Oklahoma State teams or whatever. A lot of them saying he handled tough questions from the media perfectly.
Well, yeah, and I've seen enough First Take to know right there that Molly Quorum was baiting big time and trying to get him to say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I can't play for a coach who would do that." No, he understands that. Look, we need facts. We need to make sure we step back and look at all this. That was the right answer.
Yeah.
And for those people that are on Twitter saying, hey, he had a chance to say more and he didn't, he realizes this doesn't – I think he realizes it now maybe more than he did originally when he tweeted originally, was this maybe it wasn't his intent to be such a huge, monumental thing. I think he really wants change within the program. Did he really want the entire nation to be completely focused on this for this last week?
Yeah.
I don't. When he sent that tweet, probably not. I think there was so much that played into the emotional hitting the button of tweet there that he realized later on maybe this was not exactly how he wanted it to go down.
It almost feels like he tweeted it out to try to get a response from OSU, and kind of forgot the fact that he's now a national name. And because that's the thing is, when some of the Clemson players or the Iowa players tweeted out, it didn't really make shockwaves down here because it was nobody we recognized or whatnot. And ultimately, it made national headlines because of it featured a championship coach and a strength coach who ultimately got fired. But the reason it got picked up so quickly and caught like wildfire is because it was literally one of the top 5 faces in college football.
There are people that sit on Chuba Hubbard's Twitter all day long. They have his notifications ready to go. They have before this, and then that's part of their job is to make sure. Oh my gosh, this athlete tweets this. I got to be the first to get it out there. So that's why I really do believe that he realizes, and he has, like I said, he already apologized, but he realizes that, man, if I had gone about this in terms of just going to Coach Gundy, maybe I wouldn't be sitting here on First Take having to avoid some of these bait questions.
But at the same time, I think again, it's a double-edged sword because now he says he's starting to see change. Things are in motion, but it also reinforced to him ultimately that he does have a voice.
Yeah.
And because that's the thing is, like, ultimately he could have said, if OSU said, hey, First Take wants to talk to you about this, he could have said, man, you know what, I still just want to keep it in the house. He still understood, okay, I have a platform, and I'm gonna attach my platform to it of what we need, because that's what the thing is. When we get further into it, he talks about improving. Because he actually says something very similar to what Mike Boynton said about needing change with the broken system of NCAA violations. That Chuba says, I want to make things better for the black people in my program and other programs across the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He could have gone on there, and we could be talking about a lot of different things right now. Yeah. But
he's looking big picture now that he realizes that it is bigger than just Oklahoma State.
Yeah, we'll dive more into it later and break it down, more of that clip a little bit as we go on. We're going to get to our break, and Dan Buffa will join us out of the break, out of 590 The Fan in St. Louis KMOX. He'll have plenty to tell us about baseball, which is obviously also a huge hot topic today, as we might be getting a little closer. I say that with a ton of caution because you just don't know anymore with Major League Baseball. We'll talk about all that with him next.
It's been a too long time with no peace of mind. I'm ready for the times to get better. I've got to tell you, I've been racking my brain.
Welcome back, Triple Play Sports Radio Network, the afternoon sports drive here. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist with you, 1020, 1580 AM, 105.1, 93.1 FM, Triple Play Sports Radio app. Tons of ways to listen. Joining us now as well, Dan Buffa out of St. Louis. I know, Dan, I got to go through this list of everything that you contribute to. 590 The Fan, KMOX, KSDK, you write for St. Louis Game Time, and I got to say, I checked out the website a little bit too today, and that article about the 10 other jobs that Rob Manfred should consider, that was fantastic.
Yeah. I try to spread the words around the internet. I'm getting a little better at that, but it's not always easy.
Yeah, but, we know that for sure over here too. How's everything been going in St. Louis, man? St. Louis is the wrong city to have no sports going on in the summer.
Yeah, it really is weird. The downtown area has kind of been stricken a little bit with this quietness, even on the weekend nights in the summer. And it's just you're not used to it. Usually with there's either in the last month or so playoff hockey and baseball going on downtown. Right now there's just about nothing. So it's pretty quiet. A lot of events have been canceled. A lot of concerts didn't happen. So it's been a very surreal and oftentimes kind of sad scene down there.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case in a lot of places, especially bigger cities that, the ones that have big sports franchises too. It's like, man, this is just not the same. Well, let's look into a little bit of since we're talking baseball. I thought yesterday I was like, better see if I can get Dan on with all this craziness going on back and forth with the players and the owners. And at one point it looks like yesterday, wow, we're getting close, and all of a sudden last night it's like maybe not. I'm telling you, man, this has been the craziest back and forth. Has this been the worst back and forth between owners and players of any sport that you can think of?
I really can't. I mean, I can't really remember too much of the '94 strike. I imagine that's got to be the worst because they actually did cancel the season. But this is a situation where you're just trying to get back on the field. You're trying to give the fans a little bit of a season, and right when you thought that it was kind of turning a corner and maybe the owners could just give them a date to report and then we get games, then all of a sudden the players want 70, 72 games now. So it's just like two groups of kids fighting on a playground, and parents on the side are shaking their heads. Well, in this situation, fans are the parents. This is like, and this is like, it's unusual to have this go on for so long, especially when other sports are pretty much rounding third base when it comes to getting their seasons back.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My argument has been for a long time now, it may not be this way to some people, but I truly believe the fans deserve this. I mean, seriously, the fans deserve to have a season starting back up and should have already started back up. When you look at it, people forget that we're the ones that end up paying salaries when it gets down to brass tacks this year. So I don't know how you think about that, what you think about that, but I'm pretty sure if you were to ask a bunch of fans, hey, should they at least just get it going back for the fan bases, I think a lot of people would be like, yeah, right now.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if a bunch of very popular restaurants just all of a sudden wanted to strike, and people were outside going, I really just want a cheeseburger. I mean, can we just come to an agreement so I can just get some food? But in this case, you're talking about a game that enriches a lot of people's lives. It's jobs for people that are going to be in that stadium, the players, and now also just normalcy. I mean, this is a year where normal has been pretty much blown up, and at this point, 50 games, 60 games, whatever it is, you just want something just to kind of take your mind off everything else that's going on.
Yeah, I mean that's what we've said so many times is sports are such a distraction to everything else that's become a distraction, which unfortunately some things are not what we want to be distracted with right now. Let's kind of look at the proposal. 70 games, as you said, July 19th through September 30th with full prorated pay. Do you think the owners go for that? Do they reject it and come back with something else?
I think what we're hearing on Twitter and around the internet is that they're going to reject it. I think according to John Heyman, one owner said it was dead on arrival. This is just something where if you're a player and you just, big names just spoke up a few days ago saying, tell us when and where to report. Well, why are you trying to put up a new proposal that that the players or the owners are just going to say no to? So this is just going to add on days. And if they want to get back on the field in that proposal, which is basically a month, I mean, they have to stop these shenanigans and really get down to brass tacks, which should be safety and health regulations on the field. But we haven't heard anything about that. We haven't heard anything about what they're going to do as far as that when it comes to really finalizing those plans. It's just all been money, and it's all been very, very public.
Dan Buffa joining us here from 590 The Fan, KMOX, KSDK. You can follow him on Twitter at Buffa82. Dan, when it looks at some of these parts of the proposal, are you a fan of the universal designated hitter?
I didn't used to like it, but now in the last couple of years, I've kind of come around on it. I think it's going to be exciting for the game, and I think that it's something that was bound to happen. And also, I don't know if I can really take it again where the bases are loaded, there's 2 outs, your pitcher is throwing well, but here he comes to the plate, and it's going to be like a pathetic 4-pitch at bat where he strikes out.
That's exactly right.
I think all those occasions have slowly melted me down from my old school loving baseball ways to, okay, let's just get an extra bat in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and when I look at, I completely agree with all that, by the way. When I look at where we are, I mean, June 18th, sitting here on June 18th, and we haven't started baseball of any sort. And yet we've got Little League starting back up in a lot of places. We've got high school baseball in Iowa. I mean, this has come to a point where it's just like we are almost at like an unacceptable point. I know it seemed like a really good idea at one time that July 4th, that would be the perfect launch date. Everyone was talking July 4th, baseball back. Yeah, how great would that have been for St. Louis?
It would have been great. I mean, 4th of July weekend in St. Louis, I mean, that's a sold out. I mean, that's nearly 50,000 people at Busch. I mean, this is the second, I think I read today, the second longest period of time in the history of the game where there hasn't been a game. Ever since the end of the World Series up until now, they're stretching, getting ready to hit that probably a mark where you may go a whole year without a game. I mean, almost just about. I mean, as it gets more and more, if they keep fighting over money, getting everything nailed down, all the details, that still has to happen. So, and every time you back it up, imagine if they don't get out of June without a real agreement, you almost have to just cancel the season. Yeah,
I think that would be a little bit. At that point, you're like, okay, we just don't have enough time. I mean,
we don't have the time.
We don't. It's coming to that point, and it's really frustrating. I know from a fan standpoint too. Let's look at a little bit here with Yachty. Yachty made some comments earlier that have kind of gone under the rug here a little bit with everything else going on regarding free agency and everything like that. Do you see him? I mean, is there any way that Yadier Molina doesn't retire in a Cardinals uniform?
I think that it's less than 1%. I cannot see the Cardinals letting that happen. I mean, they're going to have to pay him a little more money than you would a guy his age. Yes, but I think, and I've written about this so many times, that I think you have to just put aside the normal way that you would look at a player like him in his late 30s and understand that he can still provide Gold Glove caliber defense. He's still a decent bat as long as he doesn't hurt his thumbs. If he can go 1 year without hurting his thumbs or catching a very, very hard baseball in a very, very bad spot, freak injuries, especially with his hands, he's been a good hitter. And so I think the Cardinals, with this legacy coming into play and the fact that he's still pretty useful, they have to find a way. I mean, I can't see a scenario where he does not finish his career in St. Louis.
I said to me that would be like for instance, Tom Brady leaving. I mean, really, like I think of another athlete that I, especially grown up loving, and like not even being. It was kind of the same way with Albert. Didn't think I'd be able to see him in a different uniform.
Of course, yeah, me too.
But Yachty, I mean, come on, that they're going to have statues of him out in front of Busch Stadium at some point. So yeah, that's pretty crazy to think about. I know that you have watched Long Gone Summer, correct?
Yes, sir.
I want to know what you thought about it. I thought it was very well done. It almost took, and I knew it was coming, but it's still almost at the end of it, it took that sharp right turn where it was like home run race. Everyone was interested. Baseball was everything. And then, the doping and the steroids and all of that. What did you think about it?
I think at this point, I mean, you're going to have to go throughout the history of baseball to try to find out who cheated and who may have cheated and who didn't cheat. And that's going to be one of those spreadsheets I'm just not going to really want to put together. So at this point, I pretty much resigned myself to going, look, these two guys helped save baseball, and it was a thrilling time to be a fan. And yes, did they do it by a certain means? Sure, but the game they weren't regulated. I mean, I think if people want to be mad at anything with regards to the last part of that documentary, be mad at the owners, be mad at the managers for not keeping this in check. I mean, if there's nothing really to come down to you as far as a fine or a penalty, you're going to look to that edge, and these two guys, combine, and this is what made the Bonds home run thing in 2001 kind of an empty story, was because he didn't really have anybody going toe-to-toe with him like McGuire had Sosa, and that's what kind of made the whole summer so great. And to hear Sosa and McGuire talk about it, even towards the end where McGuire kind of says, hey, I'm not going to let Sammy finish over me. I mean, I'm a nice guy, but you see the gamesmanship there, you see all the comments from the writers, and it brought everything back that made that summer so special.
So you believe that it ultimately saved baseball at that time?
I really do. I mean, I think after the 94 strike and even the couple years, few years after that, I don't think the game was really the same as far as a universal interest in it. I think it really had been ruptured in that strike season where they lost, they didn't have a World Series winner. So I think that these two guys, they brought back something that really the game loves, is the home run. I mean, that's just the way it is and the way it's been ever since. And yes, is it the kind of means where you want to tell the upcoming youth of players to do? No, but sometimes there's like an exception to the normal standard of the game where these two guys at the time when they weren't really policing it, they may have used, not the greatest of means to get it done, but it was still a stunning thing to watch, and it really brought baseball back to the top.
And in regards to that, Dan Buffa joining us here on the Afternoon Sports Drive, with everything that's going on in Major League Baseball right now, and it may not be the same since they're kind of in a unique position with how long they've been gone here, but does this cause some sort of damage to where we may see fans either leave the game permanently or at least for a long time based on everyone not being able to come to grips with getting the season started?
I really do. I think that even if they got back on the field this year, you're still going to have a lot of scar tissue come around when they have to negotiate a new CBA. I mean, it's going to come around. This is going to be a mere Band-Aid, on top of a wet piece of skin that's going to keep sliding around until they have to really bang out this new deal that's going to extend over many seasons. So I think the problems that they ran into this spring are going to definitely be something that's going to keep fans away from the stadium and possibly threaten, the 2022 season if that comes to place.
Hey, Dan, Jason Elmquist here, and we're talking a lot of baseball right now, but I wanted to kind of go back a little bit because you mentioned kind of how the stuff that St. Louis is missing out on normally right now. And it got me thinking about the fact that for kind of the second time in a few short years, football was also taken away from St. Louis with the XFL shutting down due to the pandemic. How much did that hurt the town, the city of, because I saw so much hype around that XFL franchise just to see yet another pro football team get taken away from them?
It was really kind of a gut shot because when the Battlehawks came to St. Louis, everybody latched on. It didn't matter if, your neighbor was the quarterback. I mean, there was a new football team. They had tailgates downtown. And for those select few weeks, St. Louis was into it. And the team was winning. I mean, it wasn't like they were a bad XFL team. They put on an entertaining show. They had some good talent that maybe people will see in the NFL now that it's gotten the proper spotlight. But, yeah, it was definitely kind of a sad thing. I think it's one of those things that it wasn't here long enough to really make a long dent. But for a town that just lost football, like you said back in 2016, it was kind of another just case of bittersweet kind of exit where you had this great team come into play. The town just fell in love with them. They're kind of like underdogs, the same way St. Louis was with regards to football. So it's definitely kind of a gut shot, but I don't think it's going to be one of those, man, a year from now you're thinking, man, I wish I could have some Battlehawks football. right now you're just kind of rooting for some hockey, for some Blues hockey, and for some baseball. But it was fun while it lasted, and it really came into place here pretty fast.
Yeah. I was going to say, was it another gut punch when their quarterback ends up signing with the city across the state that everyone hates in Kansas City?
Yeah. I mean, here's a guy that we thought was going to be, this guy's going to be ours at least for 2 years, and then he goes and travels up the highway. So, I mean, and I also think there's some Rams fans, especially with the Super Bowl, they're going to kind of latch on to the Chiefs. So maybe they'll find a silver lining. Maybe they'll give them more reason to like the Chiefs now that they got one of their Battlehawks on that. Dan
Buffa here on the Afternoon Sports Drive with us, and kind of with that, Dan, how much? I mean, I was so proud to see St. Louis show out the way that they did for the Battlehawks, and I mean, to proportionate levels of where we saw, sellouts of the amounts of tickets they were giving and everything like that. How much of it, though, to you was a bunch of middle fingers going up to Stan Kroenke?
Oh, it was. I mean, there was a piñata, at least one or two, and that was Stan Kroenke, and they just destroyed that in the tailgate. I mean, that had the most excitement, the most video views. It wasn't really just a bunch of Battlehawks fans, yelling like cacaw across the downtown area. It was people destroying a Stan Kroenke piñata with all the fury that any long-standing football fan can gather. So, yes, it was definitely a big middle finger to good old Stan. I think that's going to continue, but it was like, punctuated with an exclamation point when the Battlehawks were playing.
Final thing here before we let you go, the St. Louis Blues, they were kind of rolling. I was really enjoying the way their season was going, at least at some points there. We had up and downs, as they always do. But
sure.
When it comes to talk about when it comes to the Blues as a whole there, and also with Bouwmeester, I mean, I feel like that was, there was so much behind that in terms of we got to play for him, we're going to win for him, as if the Blues needed any more motivation. But how much was it of a gut check as well, kind of a gut punch to the city when hockey got postponed?
It was really tough because unlike the baseball season, which hadn't even really gotten going, it was only in spring training, the Blues were in a position where they were going to easily probably go right back deep into the playoffs. And what really complicates that matter is that it's Alex Petrangelo's last year under contract. So you have the captain of your team and arguably the backbone of it, the very important defensive piece who can also score goals. So now you're wondering, whenever they get back on the ice, is this going to be it? And with the salary cap, and of course the money that teams are going to have to spend is now not going to go up. It's going to stay right there. So Doug Armstrong's going to have to do some magician work. So it's kind of where you have this team that could really contend for another cup, but if they happen to lose Pietrangelo, then you got Vince Dunn up for it after that. So it went from being, hey, back-to-back, now we're like, man, I hope we even have a chance for back-to-back, and is this going to be the end of one of our most long-standing players? It's a very confusing time, but it's also exciting at the same time.
Absolutely. That's Dan Buffa. Dan, thanks so much for joining us here on the Afternoon Sports Drive, and be sure to follow him on Twitter at Buffa82, and hey, keep rocking it over there in St. Louis. We'll get you back on the show sometime, and hopefully when we do, we'll have sports.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Have a nice day.
Thanks, man. That's Dan Buffa. He has done a ton in St. Louis, and I mean a ton. I mean, I went down the list there of all the news outlets, the radio station. I think I didn't get to ask, I forgot there, what was so cool about, too, in the Long Gone Summer documentary, they talked about, Bob Costas actually talked about how legendary the station KMOX is there in St. Louis, how their reach is unlike any other. I mean, they've got people that can listen to Cardinals games. That's how they used to do it forever and ever, talking about Jack Buck and all of that.
My dad grew up in Russell, Kansas, which is about an hour away from the Colorado border, and he grew up listening to KMOX.
Still pick it up. Yeah. I'm telling you, the reach was one of. I forgot he put the actual amount, like total of watts and all that somehow managed to get out to all these people that became Cardinals fans because. Yeah,
when I lived out and worked out in Garden City for 2 years out of college, people out there were Cardinals fans, and they were telling me that even to this day, and again, Garden City is also like about 45 minutes to an hour from Colorado border as well. To that day, if you went out on there's some dune hills and whatnot, you could actually occasionally pick up the station even to this day.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I've heard so many people say stuff like that. With never guess where I was when I heard KMOX. So a ton of rich history there with St. Louis, obviously, and he gave us a great insight into that town, which I know. I mean, you know it too. Talk about a town that's starving for baseball and hockey. I mean, my goodness, with two teams that any given year have a chance to win it all, it's got to be brutal. And I feel for everybody there, but as Dan said, they're chugging along just like everyone else. Things are starting to reopen, and maybe some sanity will come back into the world when we get him back on, which we will at some point to talk sports, hopefully too. When we come back, we'll dive into a little bit more of the Chuba clips on First Take. He spent a considerable amount of time on there on the show this morning. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then Tom Dorado is going to join us at 4 o'clock. We'll talk with him about OSU basketball. A number of players have come out and said that they're either returning or leaving. Mostly, we're talking about players that are returning, which is the good part about that there. We'll discuss all that still to come here on the Afternoon Sports Drive.
Now I hit the scene, they like lights, camera, action. Living in a dream, now my music, they be blasting. Step out, I'm a star, always in the latest fashion.
Welcome back, Afternoon Sports Drive.
They catch me lacking.
Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist chugging along here on Thursday. We round out hour number 1. Jason, I've learned your face over there, and when you go,
we'll hit on it when we get Tom in here, because I think Tom will be interested. But I'll just read the headline because again, I'm just seeing it. We'll want to read it during the break. Get Tom's opinion as well. Kansas basketball coach Bill Self considering legal action versus NCAA.
Here we go.
Yep.
Here we go with that.
Yeah.
Remember, it was like 2 weeks ago now that was one of the main concerns was like, what is going to happen to Kansas? And we've had other things pop up since then.
Yeah.
But,
well, that's it. That's the thing. I think it was a Tuesday. I went back and because like people were like we were making comments, me and some friends, like, when's the last positive story that we've had for OSU?
True.
And I went back and I was like, the one I can remember writing is John Smith, Oklahoma State Hall of Fame. Obviously, there was the Michael Jordan one, but that wasn't really necessarily a breaking news story. But since I went, since then you've had the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. Obviously, Eddie passing away, and all this other stuff going on of late. And I went back and I looked. Okay, when was that story in the Oklahoma Hall of Fame? We haven't even been a month since that happened.
Wow.
That was the 21st of May when that story broke.
Feels like 5 months ago.
Yeah,
it really does.
I quote tweeted him, like, how has it not even been a month since I wrote that?
Yeah, I thought about that the other day too. It's just like these last few weeks it's been a bumpy ride, but and then I thought, you just said, what's the last positive story? We talked about a little bit Tom Holliday getting that job and Tulsa. That's kind of cool. Getting to hear any glimpse of like, oh my gosh, this might be something that happens when sports come back. And it's like we love to talk about that as well because I even said, I can't remember who I said it to, but I think I asked Jordan. I said, has there been a rougher time in Stillwater since these last few weeks? I mean, really with sports and OSU.
Yeah, the SI release came out. Story when it came out drew a little buzz, but then ultimately so many people were denying it, and then ultimately they were cleared on most of the charges. So that doesn't come in my mind come close to what we've seen over the past month here.
Well, and I even went back to starting it with you get the news that a few players test positive for the coronavirus. Right. There were stories that were written about that. They were like, oh my gosh, that's not good. Even though we all knew it was going to be okay. It's like people ran with that. There we go. We're starting with players testing positive in college. Then we had, like I said, the passing of Eddie. The NCAA allegations, the punishment that was handed down that just rocked everything, and then obviously the Chuba Hubbard, Mike Gundy stuff here. Jordan just sent the plane crashes. Yeah, that's
both of them, because obviously it's been eight years, I think, since the women's basketball coaches passing away and plane crash as well. But on the flip side of those were obviously worse in the individual, but there wasn't a then followed by this next thing, and then this. That's what has made the past month just
can't get a break.
Because like I said, it kind of started when Eddie Sutton passed away. It's like, man, this year just needs. Because I remember actually texting. I think it was Jordan Bishop. I was like, this year just needs to screw off.
Let's stop.
Let's just stop.
Yeah.
And then. Yeah, COVID-19 tests confirmed for players. The NCAA infractions come out, the postseason ban. This stuff with between Hubbard and Gundy. I mean, it's just been one thing after another, and it's funny because my publisher at our staff meeting on Tuesday, she's like, "Well, things should start calming down after this, though." I'm like, you just stink bit me. Something's and the thing for me is Jimmy started on vacation today over the news press, and he'll be out for the next week and a half. So hopefully we get at least a week where there's no more breaking news at Oklahoma State, because I don't know if I can handle it.
I wasn't really, there was a couple times I wasn't really worried that we didn't have enough to talk about. It was just that, we're going to need to fill it up with maybe some unusual stuff.
Some national news, stuff like that.
Which we like to put in anyways, but even more than usual. And no, we have been overloaded. I also did kind of the same thing when I do the sports report. There's times where I was like, what are you going to talk about today? Yeah. There's been too much to talk about with all of this. So, and when Tom comes in hour number 2 here, we're going to break down a little bit more. I'll play him it's part of the Stephen A. Smith talking to Chuba Hubbard there is kind of interesting as well. You mentioned with Max Kellerman's questions. I'm sure we'll get to those too. And then talk about OSU basketball with him. We'll break down Major League Baseball a little bit more. We talked it there with Dan, but we'll talk more about because in case you didn't really get it from that, yes, there was another proposal sent back from the players today, and Major League Baseball, according there to Dan, is expected to reject that.
How much is enough?
How much is enough is the main question. We'll talk about that. We'll also get into, you won't believe this, but Dr. Anthony Fauci has now a different opinion about playing sports, including football. We'll discuss all of that in hour number 2 here on the afternoon Sports Drive. Welcome back to the Afternoon Sports Drive. Hour number 2 rolls in on Thursday. Patrick Wheeler, Tom Dorado now joining. Jason Elmquist and I here. What's going on in the world of Tommy D on a Thursday in June?
Well, a little warm, really windy. Kind of was going to play golf this afternoon. I thought,
didn't happen.
Maybe just a bit windy for me, so I didn't. But it is June, right? And we're halfway through, which is hard to believe. I don't know about you guys. I just lose track of days.
Well, isn't it weird? Isn't it weird how March didn't move when all this was going on and started, and then in April, May, June is just like what? We blinked and it was over. I mean, that's how it felt like to me. I mean, March was like another day. Here we go.
But nothing's changed.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about another proposal that probably goes out the window. Baseball.
Yep.
We're close. No, we're not close.
Well, then that's why we talked about it yesterday. We kind of got a little cautiously excited. I think everybody did, because there was, oh my gosh, the framework has been agreed on, and this is about as close as we've gotten so far to an actual agreement. And then later that night, as I told Jason, he said that he believed that they would ask for more games, meaning the players, and they did. And they come out like we're not talking here until we get more games. They proposed something back, and it's a little bit more here.
And it's the crazy thing, it's not like they come out here and say 20 or 30 more games. Like, we just want 10 more. It's like, you really can't concede to 10.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Prorated.
No, I know.
We mentioned the numbers.
Talking per game.
How much money is enough at that point, though?
For us, it's $10.
$250 million, Tom.
Yeah. So
difference in 10 games.
It's not just, it's just 10 games. It's the business side saying, I see the $250 million that we don't have.
Exactly. Which at what point is enough when it comes to the money?
Well, I don't know. I've never been in that position. We had an income at one time, 150, 110, 150 plus at one time, combined in my household. And we thought, we were living on, easy street. And perhaps we did spend accordingly, to that. So your bills pretty much match what your numbers are. And I'm not saying you couldn't take a little hiccup with $85 million. But at the same time, it's principle. We kicked this around a minute. It's, all right, I signed a contract. You signed the contract. This is what we agreed upon. Now, let's not fudge here or there. I mean, nobody can anticipate what was going to go on with the virus, and you have the situation you're in now. But a contract is a contract, okay? And too many times, I know the players kind of get the bad rap here. Oh hell, how much is too much? But there have been years where the players have been taken advantage of by owners that nobody jumped up and said, "Hey, what about those owners?" I always feel like I'm raining on your parade. It's not for the love of the game. It's for the love of the living that I'm making.
I know that, and I even said, and that's kind of what I brought up to Dan, though. I was like, how much is it? Kind of my point's been like, they should come back just for the fans, right? And he said, yeah, I totally agree with that too, but it's kind of the same thing. We know why they're not.
But Herm Edwards claims you play to win the game.
I've heard Herm.
So you're actually claiming you play to win a paycheck.
You play when you actually have your contracts settled and you're playing the game, then you play to win.
So you're playing for a contract.
That's why players on the Cincinnati Reds continue throughout the whole season when they're already done halfway through. I get it now. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. See, I mean, what else have they got to look forward to?
That's why they call it a contract year.
I gotcha.
Okay, he's playing better than he ever has because he's going to be getting more money. Now it makes sense.
It's a living. It's not a charity. It's not we're going down to Couch Park and getting ready to play.
We explain things here. That's what you get when you come on the afternoon sports.
It's not hitting up sides and saying, "Here's a ball and some gloves, fellas. Let's go play." When the greenback is involved, you got a trouble.
Well, the next time I hear some pitcher is needing Tommy John surgery, rub a little dirt on it. You got money to get to go out there and pitch.
But in his contract, he's covered by that, medically speaking. So,
oh boy,
if you don't like it, my feeling is about contracts, whichever side you're on.
Yeah.
If there's something in, no matter what job you're signed, if there's 2 or 3 things in that contract you don't like, then if you sign it, you're the fool, because you can't come back and change it.
Especially these days when contracts are combed through.
Yeah.
I mean, you hire lawyers and agents for that reason. So if there's something that you miss and end up complaining about,
Mike Trout goes over every word.
Right. No, he says, look at this to your lawyer and agent. He says, looks good. Sign there for hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, you let sketchy agents trying to make millions off of you read through those contracts.
Whoa. Well, you talking about college basketball, or what are you talking
about? All.
Oh, okay.
All sports.
Okay.
College basketball. Wow. Okay, Tom. I see.
Wait, are you insinuating that players in college basketball have agents already?
They're advisors, family friends.
Oh yeah, okay. Uncle Jimmy.
Yeah, Uncle Jimmy told me that he heard it was best that I did this.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate it, bud.
Speaking of, we heard another Cowboy today that he got the advice that a good choice for him would be to stick to Oklahoma State and Rondell Walker. Recommitting.
Are they just bringing him back like publicity-wise, one at a time?
That's what it feels like.
That's we talked
about it. I actually mentioned to him, it was like,
do you really think that these guys are wavering? I mean, they haven't been. I told you guys.
You don't think Rondell Walker didn't know yesterday that he was,
or several yesterdays ago?
Exactly. Well, and that's what I mentioned off air to Patrick. What could be happening is they're letting everyone kind of have their moment, their day, and it's building the excitement for the fan base. But then they're still like, well, what about Cade? What about Cade? And then Cade's the cherry on top.
I don't want to rain on y'all's parade.
I told Jason he should do a LeBron James style sit down where the decision. Part 2.
You realize, Tom, with you coming in here and say, yeah, he's gonna commit, you are taking his moment away from him.
Well, that's true. I don't care that much about that.
You are no better than these media people who leak stories.
I'm just telling you, he's coming back, so there's no drama involved, and he was never going anywhere. I mean, if he had a chance to go somewhere, he would never come here. He would have gone and played for pay.
Did you get that straight from him? Otherwise, you're no better than Doug Gottlieb.
Oh, well, don't put me in that category. At least I didn't tweet it out. I'm saying it here. Okay?
We should get Tom a Twitter. I've been thinking about that for a while.
I've going back to Zach Lancaster. We've been trying to do that.
You and I could run it for him. I mean,
that's what we said. Yeah, he not a fan.
Speaking of lawyers,
exactly.
You guys better get some good ones to represent you.
Next guest on the show, Tom.
And me and Bill
are
Self
lawyers.
have the same lawyer.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Hey, let's listen to this is Chuba Hubbard on First Take answering a question from Stephen A. Smith. We already played the Molly Quirum's question, which I told you off air was about the Williams allegations and 89 against Gundy, and he said basically, like we said, hey, look, I wasn't even around at that time. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened.
Which is a good answer.
That's a good answer. This is what Stephen A. Smith asked him and how Chuba Hubbard answered.
So when Coach Gundy speaks and he displays the level of contrition that he appears to have displayed, is that enough for you guys moving forward? What's the mentality of the team right now? I know you can speak for yourself. You can't speak for other guys, but they are your teammates. I'm sure you've spoken to them as well. You're clearly not standing alone because you went in the auditorium at that particular moment in time, or a room or what have you, and everybody was there. What's the mentality of the team right now about Coach Gundy as we speak?
Change. We need change now. That's the biggest thing. There's a lot of people on our team that are passionate about, the same things I'm passionate about. And, the thing about our team that's so special, we're tightly knitted and we have great chemistry and we all want the same thing. And that's to have a better experience for black athletes and really all athletes at Oklahoma State. So in the
what
fact
do you mean?
Relationship.
I'm sorry, Chuba, I got to be specific here. When you say change, we know that the change that you're calling for from a societal perspective, but you're saying change within that program? Is that what you're talking about? That change needs to be made?
Absolutely. Just bettering the experience for a black student athlete. I want athletes to be able to come in through Oklahoma State and really every university and be proud to go through there and say, I'm a black student. Oklahoma State represented me well and I represented them well.
Okay, so you get he says change again, and then Stephen A. Smith's like, well, what exactly are you meaning, like, within the program? And Chuba says better experience for black student athlete. So, again, I don't know if that's really, I think Stephen A. would love for him to have detailed that, exactly what that means. Maybe. I think they wanted a little bit more out of that.
Well, because right after that, when Kellerman asks specifically what changes.
Right. And he kind of goes off on
we're gonna keep that in-house.
Yeah.
Well, just listening to that on a one-time deal, the first thing that came to my mind was, yes, you want to better this experience that he said for black athletes first, and then he said all student athletes. So do we jump to the next step that prior to his tweet, Oklahoma State was not providing a good experience for black student athletes?
And that's kind of what Kellerman, again, right after this, also asked what was your relationship like with Gundy before the OAN T-shirt? And I believe, and I don't know if you're going to pull it up, but let's listen to it because I don't want to actually summarize incorrectly what Chuba says right after this.
We'll play the Kellerman part here.
Okay, so there's a follow-up to that, and then I have another question, but they're related. The follow-up is, in what specific way do you want things to change at Oklahoma State, like before all this happened? And what's the overlap with the question is, what was your relationship like with Coach Gundy before this happened? Because what we're trying to figure out, for better or for worse, is what's in the guy's heart. What's most important is the way people behave. But given what he said and what he represented and the shirt he wore, etc., people are trying to figure out what is he really about. So what specific ways would you like the university to change to make the experience better for African American student athletes? And what was your thought about Coach Gundy and your relationship like before this happened?
I won't go in, complete specifics on, exactly what we want changed, as a team, but I'll say this, like I said, we want to better the experience for Black student athletes. We want to encourage people to use their voice and use their platform for good, and that's the biggest thing. And to speak on your second question with, what my relationship with Coach Gundy was before, it was also a work in progress. Every relationship I feel has bumpy roads, whether it's a good relationship or bad relationship. And Coach Gundy has done a lot of good things. So I will not just, shut out a man for one thing he did, but he did do wrong, and, he's going to have to make up for that.
There you go. So, yeah, Max Kellerman does ask him, he wants specifics. I said it earlier, I get that you're allowed to say what he said, and we can keep that in-house, and maybe that is the right answer, but with it being made as public as it is now, I think there are a ton of people that would love to know, not only just because, why we want to know what the changes are, but when we do know, will we be able to see if they're actually being changed? That's going to be, I think, part of it too, is if we as the public knew, okay, he wants this, this, and this, well, once he says this and once the season starts, are we able to even tell if that's happening? Is Chuba able to be satisfied? Is the team able to be satisfied?
Well, I think every interview that comes up, and this is not my call. I don't take my players and schedule them on wherever. But I think every time we have a new interview and a new set of questions, we come up with that one question that's never answered. And I go back to the first thing I thought of, and I would ask Chuba, if he was sitting here right now, I'd say, you're getting things changed now, but were they so bad that you turned down millions of dollars to go to the NFL to come back here? Were they that bad that you needed to change?
Oh, but at the same time, we've seen some former players make comments about, it, because you're thinking about it in that terms, but some of these guys also think in terms of, these are my teammates, these are my brothers. And that was somebody, I think it was Trace Clark, I believe, who tweeted out on Monday saying, I never played for Gundy. I played for my teammates. I played for my brothers. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's he wants to, he feels that there's unfinished business between he and his brothers of going out, winning a Big 12 title, making it, trying to make a college football playoff. Again, maybe trying to finish up a college degree as well. I mean, there's to just simply say that, well, if things are so bad, why didn't you just leave? Well, maybe there was also a lot of good stuff that he wanted with his teammates to be able to say, hey, I can try to go another year of dealing with this because I've got my brothers behind me.
Well, I think to be fair, and I'm divided on this, as you guys well know, I'm all for whatever discussed in that team meeting room stays there. I'm not big on
right. Yeah, it doesn't
nobody
have to
else
be made public.
Needs to know what's going on in that team room.
Right.
And there might be some things that go back and forth between coaches and players that if you heard it, it's kind of like sometimes the camera catches a coach and a player on the sideline, maybe not discussing the weather, maybe having a bad word or two. And much is made of that. That's just part and parcel of competition.
Just ask Mark Mangino. Yeah. That's exactly what happened to him.
So I'm all for that, but I'm not all for letting, with every interview, this thing just hang. Okay, if you're going to continue to talk about we're starting change and we're doing things to change, I think you owe it to the university, if not to Gundy. If you don't even want to owe it to Gundy, okay, just move Gundy over here. But you owe it to this program and to the university not to leave a door open where the next obvious question is, if you listen to these comments, well, we have to improve what was going on, or we have to get better at what was. Well, I don't know that many of our people thought that there was a whole lot of quote unquote bad going on. And as far as Trace Clark is concerned, and some of these others who have come out, I've told you, well, you not as long, and you certainly not as long, but I've said this for the 13 years I've been on this radio station. We like to create a warm and fuzzy narrative for every team at Oklahoma State. I'm sitting here and telling you that's not true. That's not like Gundy. That's not true.
Nowhere.
But it's not that way. You get 85, 100 people together in any walk of life, you're not going to have agreement with 85 to 100. You're going to have people who like one another because they come from the same background. or their skin color's the same, or they're majoring in something the same.
My argument, though, against you saying that he needs to come out and say what was wrong to begin with, at the same time you were saying that he shouldn't have even come out, but now you're saying he needs to tell us now that he's come out.
No, I didn't say that.
Yes,
I'm divided on that. Half of me says, yeah, it would be nice, but what overrides that half is that whatever is being talked about to be improved, and as we have to believe Hubbard, being improved as we speak.
And see, that's the thing. I think we also
I don't think that needs to be out.
I think we have to come at it from a point of, if it's not necessarily, if it's stuff not, if he's not using the N words, like if it's just the policies, or just the, hey, you need to have a better understanding of the players type of situation, do you really need to come out and voice that? And that's the thing. You're mandating what did you see wrong? If that's the stuff that's all that's wrong, why does he need to then come out and say that? Because then we're not allowing Gundy. And again, I've everyone who listens to me, I have a stance on Gundy, but how are we not allowing him to change as a man behind the scenes to try to with his players, if we're then saying we have to know now how he was bad? Because then that's going to take him in a negative light with everyone, and he's not going to be able to grow like the players want him to.
I think with each interview we create, I would just like to see this thing settle, okay? Everybody said their piece, so to speak. I think everybody knows where everybody is, and I don't want to use one side or the other, because that's not what's going on here. If you start throwing, well, we've heard from both sides, then you're creating a division narrative that is not there. But I think with every interview comes another set of questions, and that one guy was just blunt, well, what is it you want to change? And I tend to agree that whatever is going on in any organization, but we're talking football situation here, needs to remain in there.
And that goes back to Hubbard's original tweet. What he said, that if it didn't, which it sounds like it didn't, according to Chuba, should have happened behind closed doors, and the same thing. So I think the argument maybe you're trying to make, Tom, and I agree with it, if it is this, is it doesn't have to be made public, all that stuff. It doesn't have to tell us what the changes are going to be. But since it was originally made so public to where literally everybody could see, you do understand why we as the media or fans or people in general would just like to know exactly what he's talking about. At the same time, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to be mad if it stays behind closed doors. But since it was made so public to begin with, why not just continue that if that's going to be the standard here? And I don't know if Chuba, he probably doesn't want necessarily, and I told Jason this, to be as big as it's becoming. Going on ESPN and having to talk about all this stuff, and maybe that tweet was not meant for, and in his mind, maybe I'm making excuses for him, but maybe it wasn't meant to be this worldwide thing that we're all having to look at and deal with here. But it's what you get when you go on Twitter. I mean, I'm not trying to blame Chuba again, but he knows he did wrong.
And that's, again, he's come out and said that, I apologize for going on social media, but his response to Kellerman's question of what was your relationship like before the T-shirt.
I thought that was pretty blunt.
I think that was the interesting thing, though, is why I'm a little more okay with the tweet coming out, because he made it sound like things were already a little rocky. Like all relationships are a work in progress, and he's come out in his message Monday night, and then a tweet on Tuesday is people need to be held accountable. And it almost sounds like when you combined everything so far, is that he felt Gundy's actions before OAN were not being held accountable, and he just finally fed up to where he took to social media.
And Tom, what you said about, not everybody. There's disagreement everywhere, especially on teams with that many people and players involved.
Uh-huh.
That's what people need to realize, that it's okay.
It's okay to have the same idea.
It's okay to have
to disagree.
Yeah, and even you can even take it to the level of football. You and I play on the same team, but we might disagree on the play call here.
Right. We might not like the guy who's
exactly, and that's fine. People don't. That's my problem is that people don't realize that it is okay to not agree on every single thing, and when we don't, it's also okay to discuss it amongst each other.
What do we spin around?
And I think,
here?
but I think
we
that's
spin the family word to the point where
cowboy culture.
But we're not all that naive.
But I think that's the thing that what Chuba's trying to hit home is, and because that's the thing, he hasn't brought up politics. He even said, "I'm not a politician." Mm-hmm. I think what frustrated him with OAN was the known fact that OAN has made comments like Black Lives Matter movement is a farce, that it's a terrorist organization, stuff like that. That's what drove him to that point. It's not because everyone keeps saying, well, it's the political stance. I don't think that's the case because he's never talked about politics. He's never said, I don't like Gundy because he's a Republican or because he's a Trump supporter. It's you are endorsing a network repeatedly that we know for a fact, or that everyone across the country can look up on Twitter, that says Black Lives Matter actually don't matter. That I can see why he's frustrated.
Yeah, but he's not consistent either. If what he says today is true, and I'm right there with you, do not need to hang your laundry out for everybody to watch. You just don't need to as a team. The public doesn't need to know what goes on in those rooms. They just don't. But you have that same opportunity before you put that tweet out to do this very thing you're talking about. He had to be still as mad as a hornet before he tweeted it out. Then they had the ability to get Gundy in off the farm or wherever he was, or back from fishing.
But that's the thing.
And bring him in and say,
like I just said,
this is what we don't like.
But like I just said, it sounds like they have been doing that, and they weren't getting a response.
I'm not. You don't know that to make that statement.
Okay. When you hear him say that the relationship was, he essentially says it was rocky before the OAN thing, there was a work in progress, and then he says it's up to Gundy now to make the change. Does not, and again, it could be, I don't know what it was that made him upset. Maybe it could be something that he did specifically to Chuba or a teammate, or his comments from back in April. But what he said today made me assume that there was something boiling before the T-shirt being worn.
There definitely might have been, and it's just like kind of you said, we just don't know what it would have been about. We can't say it was about race or anything like that either. We just don't know.
Take that to the coach. He's your star player.
I know, and that's the thing. That's what he said since then, though, is that he got frustrated because there were no consequences for actions. And that's the thing is, so if there were previous instances and you keep going to Gundy or you've gone to Holder and nothing changes.
Well, we don't know if that happened, okay?
But you don't know it hasn't, because like I said, he made it sound like that he was frustrated about things happening before the T-shirt not getting changed. So it makes it sound like that he potentially talked to someone, I would assume, is the way it made it sound like.
We got to get to our break here. I would believe
make this blanket statement.
Yeah.
If these concerns prior to the tweet were brought to the head coach's attention,
or AD.
No, I'm getting there.
Okay.
And if there was no resolution or no satisfaction or whatever word you want to put in there on Hubbard's part, I guarantee you, if he went to Mike Holder and gave him, and he's the only guy who needs it, a list of 10 things that I don't like what's going on and my brothers don't like what's going on, there would have been a big meeting that it would include Hubbard and Gundy. So I don't think the end of the road should have been, if in fact it was, and we don't know that was happening.
And I will agree with you on that. Before we take this break, I think the tough thing we have to keep in mind, though, now is so many situations now, whether it's in sports or in my business or whatever, a lot of employees are almost afraid to go above their boss because they've seen so many people get in trouble for circumventing the system, how it's supposed to go up. So that could have been played a factor. I don't know 100%.
This is Chuba Hubbard. This is not a fifth string running back.
I know, but it's also a 21-year-old kid who knows his boss is Mike Gundy.
But he had enough passion to put it out on Twitter and start all this.
But that's because this is a new generation.
When we come back, we will talk about OSU basketball, who's staying, who's leaving. Then we'll get into Dr. Fauci's comments about the NFL. Also to come here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. back to the afternoon sports drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler, Jason Ohnquist, and Tom Dorado. I'm going to have to separate those two over there.
Oh, no. We're actually, I think we got into agreement. That's usually what happens. We clash, and then we can realize that we're both on the same page. And like I said, we've made this comment before. Sometimes I wish there were a way to record with immunity some of our off-air breaks.
There's no immunity. There isn't a breaks, but not on the air.
No, because some of it gets a little more lively during the breaks for sure.
I know we got to change sports and all, and I don't know if we have to address that caller. Okay. Long story short, I hope that this new dynamic, if you want to call it that, where there's conversation and there's listening and there's communication. I don't necessarily think giving in is the right terminology. Some may take it that way, but I'll be interested in seeing how this dynamic affects the organization of the Oklahoma State football team, because I'm of the old school, and abuse is not what I'm talking about, okay? But coaches coach, players play, all right? And that doesn't mean players can't speak up, doesn't mean players don't have a voice, because without players, coaches are not around. I mean, they don't have another job.
I think that
I'll be interested in seeing how this year goes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In light of that.
I think the interesting thing from all of this is people are getting in a fuss over the players, I think the way you used it, the tail wagging the dog. But it's not like they came out and said, well, we need to be running the ball more. It's literally nothing football related. That's what I find most fascinating with this, and that's what we need to almost separate. I get it. It's a sports franchise. It's an organization. But the change they're asking for is on a human level. That's the interesting thing that we need to keep in mind. It's not like there's... It'd be one thing if Hubbard would have tweeted out, we need to run the ball more. I know we ran it quite a bit last year, but we need to run the ball even more.
I don't think anybody's accusing him of that, and I don't think that was his intent.
I know, but that's the thing is we're taking it from the mindset of, well, this is a sports team, so they need to get back on the same page. They shouldn't have done this. Well, but this isn't a sports-related situation that's being brought up. I think that's the thing we almost need to separate them, and we're unable to because it is still an athlete and a coach.
I would just assume, and I'm going to have no say-so in it. None. But I thought this was kind of resolved, quote-unquote, yesterday.
Yeah.
And with each time somebody else goes on somebody's interview, it opens up yet another question.
See, it hasn't really for me.
And that other question's always hanging out there, and I'm not coming off my field. Whatever's discussed stays there, okay?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be in the news press.
But you also want to know.
But there is that obvious question that if you are going to imply and put out there that now things are going to change from what they were before this tweet, okay, what needs to change? How have we existed just during your tenure, Chuba Hubbard? How have you stayed here for a couple of years and all this stuff was going on that you didn't like?
See, and I think that it almost benefits Chuba a little bit from detailing what change would be made, because you would have more people that would, in a way, be able to hold Gundy and or the team accountable.
But I think the important thing of not saying, coming out with the mandates or this is what is you're not necessarily limiting the scope of it. If we don't know what the demands are and stuff like that, you're not boxed in. Then you're not, you don't have to say, Gundy can't come back and say, well, I reached these demands that you said on Twitter, so I can go still do this other stuff. Like I think that's the big thing we have to keep in mind is it almost feels like the players are wanting to keep, and again, this is going to sound bad, but keep Gundy in check when it comes to the racial instances that they're feeling within the program.
And if he's not, to use your term, kept in check, do we have more?
Maybe that's when they go to hold
brought up.
That's the thing.
In media availability, so post game,
but that's the thing is maybe
because you think this is the only. Do you think this will not dog Chuba Hubbard the entire year?
Oh, and even into the NFL, and when he's being, when he's going through all that,
Gundy gets paid a lot of money, to go before the press every week,
right,
and answer the same questions every week. Mm-hmm. And he's adept. But you think this one issue, and not on a negative sense, You think he won't be asked every post game? Or are things better? Are things changed?
Right.
Okay, what's better?
Or before every game, yeah. And but I think at the same time, you've brought him into this mix of go to Holder and stuff like that. My assumption by now is Holder has stepped in, probably talked to Hubbard, and said, "Hey, next time there's any issue, you come directly." Maybe it's a case where he even says, "Don't even go to Mike, don't go to Twitter. You come to me directly." And maybe that's where they can start seeing the improvement that they're needing. Is hopefully now that it was aired out, and again, I think we all agree that it was the poor way to do it, but if it wakes up the eyes of not just the program but his bosses now, maybe the players are going to see the improvement. Because that's the thing is, we got to keep in mind, Chuba's not just saying changes in the program. He did, but then he evolved and said on the campus. It's more than just in the football program. That's the thing we need to keep in mind as well.
What we need to remember, too, is it'd be kind of interesting to think about here, too, is when we saw his tweet was, what if he had not threatened to sit out?
To boycott, yeah.
To boycott. Would we even still be talking about this today? Because I think it was addressed quick enough to where people almost forget that he actually threatened to not do anything with Oklahoma State. I mean, we could be talking about a lot more right now. We could be like, we're day 3 into a Chuba Hubbard boycott here. So that was what brought, I think, even more attention to it and maybe blew it up a little bit more. What the caller said to me there over the break was, it was kind of what I brought up the other day, is he hopes that we're at the point now where we can start focusing on football. And he's talking about Gundy and Chuba Hubbard too. It's like, and they mentioned it in their videos, get to the goal of what our goal was to start the season. That's to win a national championship.
I think even Trey Sterling, when he tweeted out,
he did
said time to focus on the season.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I think the players, I think we're going to see from, and that's why I think, while I know you felt that there was more questions needed following the interview with First Take, at the same time it feels like Hubbard's starting to take the media approach of, we're focusing on the season. Yeah, we're going to keep trying to see those changes, help Gundy with recognizing these things, but when it comes to the team, we're keeping it in house.
And that, I hope he's 150% true.
Yeah.
Because I would hate to see this in any year drive any kind of distraction problem into the locker room, especially this year. I mean, with they're sitting on possibly a just tremendous year.
That's the thing, you have to throw in there too.
But you don't know that,
yeah.
And that's the thing that I wish, I wish we just let it settle, let the system work behind the scenes. We don't need a play-by-play every day, every hour. I assure you, having worked on that side of the fence, everybody who needs to be involved in this thing is involved in it and has been for several days. They are working to make this not go away, because I would hate to have somebody say that.
Yeah.
This doesn't need to go away.
Yeah.
But they're working to make sure that it goes forward as one.
Yeah.
And this is not a division.
That's why it was refreshing yesterday. There was not, the only connection to it was Gottlieb coming out and apologizing for his moronic tweet on Tuesday. But then obviously late in the day, the ESPN Plus sends that stuff out on their platform. And, it happened almost late enough that it kind of got lost in the media cycle, the news cycle. But it was also, I think, important enough because you got Gundy for the first time really almost attacking himself by saying that he was a dumbass for wearing the shirt. It was no longer just Hubbard saying, the shirt. It was, I'm an idiot. And so like there was a little bit of that, but now again you got Hubbard back in it, and again I don't know if that was a Gavin Lang decision, a Hubbard decision, a Mike Gundy decision. Obviously ESPN would have probably asked for him, but again, like you said, hopefully we can move on without having to get the national media involved. I know there's a hope that the local media will get to talk eventually, because we're the ones who actually cover these guys a little and know, how to kind of talk with these players and coaches without just straight up saying, well, why do you hate Gundy?
Right, exactly.
like Kellerman's doing. We're not going. From my experience with the beat writers on this beat, we're not going in there to get, I got you. We're going in there to, what my goal is to inform the fans. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm not going in there to get a 15 minutes of fame, as some people will claim what happened on Monday. That's not my goal. My goal is to go in there, and most of the reporters I know that cover this program is to inform the fans, and that's what hopefully we can do if we get access, instead of turning it into a national talking piece like ESPN has been doing.
You can't control the media. I mean, no matter what we like to think. Know. But at the same time, you can control the narrative, and maybe just leaving it here. I mean, that's it. All that needs to have been said has been said. Discussions continue to go on. The education, everybody is going on. The people at Oklahoma State, and when you say, I want to improve it for black students at Oklahoma State, it's again, you're leaving a door cracked open that, well, the black students at Oklahoma State, did they not have a good experience?
Well, and that's why I think it kind of people don't connect the two dots. But yesterday, when there was no news from the program and whatnot, there was a significant shift within the university, because Burns Hargis came out and said, I'm turning it over to the Board of Regents to make a decision on Murray Hall. Which apparently has actually been, there was originally a petition back in 2016 to get it replaced or renamed. So, and interesting enough, the board meets Friday, and the significance of that decision bearing weight on Friday is significant for the community and the black community, because Friday is Juneteenth. Right. That is recognized as the day that slaves were announced as free men. That is exactly what OSU wants to finish this week off with, everything that started off. And I think that's why it was perfect that you saw Burns Hargis come out yesterday when it kind of, there was no word from the football program of saying, we're going to move forward with this. We have to make a decision Friday.
Which supports what I've been telling you. Just as soon as this tweet came out, there have been a number of agencies, athletically, administratively, regents-wise, that sprang into action. And they're working the best they can, in my feeling, to get whatever grievances, whatever complaints, whatever let's just soft sell, whatever observations have been raised. They have worked, and they are working to make sure that those things get taken care of.
And that's why, as much as we've said it, as Chuba Hubbard should have gone man-to-man to Gundy, we're also seeing that because he did it, the change is actually happening faster, and that he's the platform that he wants to be on. Because he came out on social media on Monday, he is seeing that change that he was hoping for. I think that's the thing we can't forget.
There's no denying that with a platform like with his name and something on Twitter, can affect a lot. It just, was it the right way? We've all pretty much agreed no. When we come back, we'll talk about OSU basketball. That's next.
Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what.
Welcome back, Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. We're wrapping it up here on Thursday. Patrick Wheeler, Tom Dorado, and Jason Elmquist with you as we have just a couple of minutes here. And we'll hit on, well, that's unfortunate. We only have a couple minutes. I was about to rip into Dr. Anthony Fauci, but apparently
I'm going
to.
We all need a bubble.
Yeah, he now says football needs to be played in a bubble if it's going to happen. And
just football in general?
Football in the fall. Yeah. I said.
In a bubble.
I said. This dude has been on every single side of every single argument during this entire.
But it's based on the evolving data.
Yes, it is.
And the problem
that's what I was going to say. I give him credit for that, but when you do it this many times, I'm talking. I can name plenty of instances.
It's because so many governments have gone against what the suggestions and stuff like that.
Then here's what you do.
He's giving his opinion on what's based on what's going on in the current moment.
His opinions that he gave when he gave in whatever it was a couple months ago that we can play football if we do this. just don't give it to that much of an extent. Like, say, we might be able to play football, but let's wait and see. Don't be like, yeah, we're for sure going to play football, because that's what he said. Now he comes back and say, well, I don't think we're going to play football. Like, dude, I get there's, like, changing data and all this, but let's make sure
everybody's got a bubble.
That was also before everyone reopened far faster than they probably should have, because numbers are spiking again. That's again, if you actually look at the curve, flattening the curves, us between especially a lot of the European, we never actually flattened it. We plateaued, where everyone else actually dipped way down.
Yes, but the cases are there, but the deaths, the positive percentage, we're sitting a little over 4%. I mean, that's still not as bad as what it really. Death per capita was a lot worse in European countries.
But what happens when mass amounts of people? Because again,
we don't know.
We've brought up, because obviously Memorial Day weekend, the protests of late, the rally over in Tulsa. We're going to start seeing potential of those numbers increasing with stuff like that, and then obviously that's the thing we got to keep in mind with sports. Is it's a place that draws a lot of people together, and that's their worry. And because that's the thing we got to keep in mind. Because and I was talking with my wife about it earlier today. We heard that Texas has 13 positive cases, and then another 10 players for the football program are being quarantined due to trace contact. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens if that happens in the middle of the season? If suddenly Oklahoma State has a third of their players, and let's say half of the 20 that are sidelined are starters.
Yeah.
I mean, do you really want to watch the scrubs playing?
You won't be playing, and you have to play somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think Bowlesby kind of alerted to that possibility that might happen.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Wait till students come back. Now, you think all these get-togethers are big, but eventually you're going to have to get out.
Right.
See what happens.
And that's why I'm wondering, at a certain point, do you give up on the whole quarantining athletes? Because I mean, you that's a dangerous line to think about, but what happens when there's more kids on campus, when it's in the middle of the season? Are you really going to be able to quarantine 23 athletes for 2 weeks?
You may say that you can, but I doubt that you actually can.
Yeah.
Really quickly here, let's get out these names.
Coaches are probably hoping you can, too, because you won't be around them.
Yeah.
Yorane and Hitty Ressing are gone.
Yep.
Transferring.
Yep.
Isaac Likely, Caleb Boone, Chris Harris Jr., Avery Anderson, Donovan Williams, Farron Flavors, and Rondell Walker. I believe I named all the ones that have announced they are returning.
And today, Bryce Williams also officially confirmed on Instagram that he is coming to Oklahoma State.
And
there you go.
Still waiting for Yet. We're going to dribble. Keelan's not come out, so I guess he'd be tomorrow.
Yeah.
He'll be coming back.
Still waiting on him officially.
You would assume, right? I mean, you would assume if Caleb's already committed.
I would say you made the right assumption. Yeah.
Okay. But I also know what assuming does.
And we're waiting for we're waiting for the last guy to be there.
We're gonna have a decision. The decision. I'll go produce it if I need to.
Rest easy the weekend.
If Cade Cunningham, you always talk about athletes wanting attention and whatnot. Don't even tweet anything out. Just leave it. Just nothing.
Just show up,
and then on July 15th when you can show up for practice, he just walks in.
That'd be a big first practice.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be. Is he here? Is he here? Oh man.
Oh boy, there he is.
Or we'll have people stationed at Gallery Rive Arena just waiting for him
on the outskirts of town. Looking. I thought I saw him walk in.
This has been the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. That's Jason Elmquist. That's Tom Dorado. Big thank you to Dan Buffa for joining the show early on. That's going to do it for us here. I'm Patrick Wheeler.